Again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll share your knowledge regarding copyright and licensing. Just for information to my colleagues, not just a local and overall, Mr. Donald Taylor is a copyright and licensing officer and head of interlibrary loans, working in Simon Fraser University Library. So welcome again, and if you don't mind, let's directly go to our questions. Maybe it's more specific that I asked you to help me. So would you like me to read the questions, maybe just to be clear for our user as well, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So the first question was how university libraries in Canada manage control of digital lending.
So there's very little true controlled digital lending in Canada at this point. Different libraries are working on different projects. So like I know the University of Alberta is working on one, the Vancouver Public Library is working on one, there's been other libraries. And certainly there is one academic library in Ontario that they do have controlled digital lending, and they are using the Internet Archives platform as the technology for their controlled digital lending. And that library is actually the only one I know of in Canada that is currently doing controlled digital lending. But again, they use the Internet Archives platform, so that's the technology basis, and then they use the standard controlled digital lending, whereby, that print book, it's not in their collection anymore. It's been it's sitting off inaccessible now, and the digital copy is made available through the Internet Archives open library. And again, it's one user at a time. The patron can sign it out for 2 weeks. So again, it says that one-to-one. So there are certainly libraries in Canada that are working towards implementing controlled digital lending, but very, very few are actually currently doing it. And one of the roadblocks to that is the technology platform, right? Because you have to be able to loan and control that digital copy, and most libraries here, we don't actually have that sort of a technology platform. So people are looking at which technologies to use for it, and that's more of the barrier. Because certainly there are definitely libraries who have everything ready to go, and a lot of the material that will be used for controlled digital lending will be either material where copyright expired, or material which has been what they call is what they use the phrase out of commerce, meaning you can't buy the book any longer, and you haven't been able to buy it for a very long time. Like, it's been out of print and not available from the publisher for a few decades. Those are the sorts of controlled digital lending projects that are underway right now in Canada.
Okay, just want to double check to be clear. One of your points, like the technology and the software issues that you're looking for matching, institutions or university working together. That's one of the goals, as I understand.
Yes, that's right. Yes, people want definitely. Yeah, there will be libraries working together to, use the same platform or share it, something like that. Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Is it any, let's say, recognized or maybe most used in your libraries, or any system, or under some integrated library system, or in any platform? Is it any name or any brand or supplier in Canada, or you use outside of Canada?
Oh, so I guess really the only two options I'm really aware of are either the Internet Archives platform, and they have a platform in Canada and also in the United States, so we could use, and also Ex Libris or Alma, they have a module as part of their integrated library system. It's called something digital, and it would be a controlled digital lending platform. Yes. So, and lots of academic libraries in Canada are using or moving to the Alma library system. So yes, like Simon Fraser University uses Alma, and that will be something we would look at. Would be that
the Alma most, popular system, integrated library system in Canada, as you mentioned.
Yeah, amongst academic libraries, Alma is becoming popular.
Okay, thank you. That was something new for me, Jet. That was interesting that you specially choose, stop on Alma. Thank you. If you know additional notes or comments, maybe let's go to the second question. We as an AD library mostly try and work with the electronic ILL and document delivery, and would like to know the key factors about this operation, or let's say service, and want to know your experience. So for
document delivery, electronic document delivery, that's at least for us, it's a fairly well-established process now. So in Canada, under our Copyright Act and such, it's perfectly acceptable and legitimate to, copy a chapter from a print book or copy an article from a print journal and send that to the requesting library, or send it to one of our own patrons for that matter. And when it's an electronic journal, which is then governed by a license, you just need to check to see what the license conditions are for interlibrary loan or for document delivery. And in the vast majority of cases, those licenses allow you to send a digital copy of the article to, another library for the purposes of interlibrary loan or document delivery service. But again, for when it's an e-resource, you have to make sure to check the license and see what the license says. And when it comes to pure interlibrary loan, so like a book, not an article, not a copy of something. So for doing books, of course, we never digitize an entire book and send it to another library. We just send them the physical book because we don't have the CDL infrastructure to do it differently. And also, and when it comes to electronic books, like the Simon Fraser University Library, we have access to an awful lot of electronic books. Maybe only 3 of those, of the publishers or the vendors, allow the interlibrary loan of the entire ebook. They allow you to actually send a copy of the ebook to another library. We only have, I think I said, like 3 licenses that allow that. So it's not something that we do very much of, and it's all governed by the license. It's not even a copyright issue.
What is the percentage of the books? To copy or just send a chapter?
Oh, so for us, we have guidelines at our institution. Most Canadian universities have, so in Canada, we have something called fair dealing, which is the exception in our Copyright Act, which allows you to make a copy. And we have, so one of the purposes or one of the reasons you can copy something under fair dealing is research. So interlibrary loan or document delivery, it's always done for research purposes. And usually our limit is around 10%. Okay, 10%. So like, we'll send like 1 chapter of a book to another library, or, around 10% of the book.
So maximum 10% could be scanned and sent or whatever
so
can be
those are the
copied?
guidelines that we follow. And again, and we will do a bit of an analysis. So again, it does depend on the age of the book. Like the older the book, it might be a little bit more. It might be more fair to copy a little bit more of it because, well, they couldn't even, there's no way that anyone can buy it anymore. So, if they want 12 or 15%, it would still be like, okay, fine. This book is 50 years old. You can't find it anywhere, so we can copy. We will send you.
So older book maximum size is growing, like
yes, exactly. Yeah.
More than 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the third question is how to manage print textbook scanning and sharing process. The textbooks are some specific direction of the academic libraries, as you know. So how you manage this in your university, for example?
At our university and at other universities across Canada, the only copying of textbooks that would happen would be, again, what would be considered fair dealing. So for library reserves, you might put a chapter from a textbook on reserve because that's all the class needs is that one chapter, right? So there's no controlled digital lending happening with regards to textbooks in Canada. It's not a thing. So, and particularly at Simon Fraser University, we just do what we always did, which is we buy the textbook and we will put it on library reserve. If the instructor wants that and the students need it, or again, for electronic reserve, we would scan a single chapter, and only one chapter, that would be the maximum, and put that. So we're not doing any sort of wide-scale controlled digital lending for textbooks, and I have to be honest, and it's kind of awkward for students because they want digital copies, and it's also very difficult for the library to ever buy a digital copy of a textbook and make it available because almost always textbook publishers only have a single-use digital copy available. It's meant to sell to an individual, and it's not meant to be used by one person one day and another person the next day. So to be honest, we're not doing anything really with textbooks and digitization.
Just theoretically following that question, what do you think? Is it fair enough to scan chapter, not a single chapter, chapter by chapter, especially during the pandemic, and provide this material to the instructor or professor that he or she just share with students? For example, we use Blackboard learning management system, and they download this material to that system. Is it, okay with the copyright and licensing concepts?
So certainly because of the pandemic, because the conditions were somewhat different, and there was no ability to physically loan anything.
Yeah.
I know that there was at least, I think there was one Canadian university library that did do some controlled digital lending of textbooks then. But again, it was not the case of, scanning, I'm going to make up a number, so 6. So scanning 6 chapters and putting those into the learning management system. Rather, they scanned the 6 chapters and made them available through controlled digital lending. One person only at a time could access the book. They could have it. It was reserved, so maybe 2 or 3 hours, and then it would expire, and the next student could access it. So it was very much very controlled, because it would certainly be, from our perspective, even if it was the pandemic, to copy multiple chapters from a single textbook and then put those in Blackboard or in Canvas or another learning management system, so that all the students in the class could access those chapters. I mean, that would be fine if we cleared the copyright and paid licensing fees, but we wouldn't do it as it would not qualify in Canada as fair dealing. So we would be in Canada, that would certainly have been copyright infringement, and we wouldn't have gone down that road.
Okay. So as I understand, in our case, the learning management system was or had the function of the CDL, and of course the material was available during some time, and just after accessing of students, they just removed from the system. So I understand it was okay in terms of the copyright and licensing. Thank you. The next question. What are the main legal differences and requirements of electronic book chapter and the journal article sharing? I mean, resource type differences. Specific, I mean, chapter, article, or what make the, I mean, key factors, key differences?
So when if it's an electronic book or an electronic journal from a publisher that a library is subscribing to, then it's going to be covered by the license that the library has signed with that publisher. It's not, copyright is not going to play much of a role in the interlibrary lending or the document delivery of that material, because the license you signed in most countries, not all countries, but in most countries, is going to, is going to either is going to trump or supersede or override your Copyright Act. So if you signed a license, I'm going to make up an example, you know, if you sign a license that says you can send as many articles as you want from this journal to other libraries on interlibrary loan, then you can send as many as you want. Or if it says you have to print it off and mail it, you know, you're not allowed to send a digital copy at all. You have to send it by the postal service to the other library, then that's what you would have to do. And it usually doesn't matter if it's a ebook or an e-journal. Usually their licenses are going to be very similar. They're just going to say normally they'll say something like you can send a portion of that item on interlibrary loan. Like you could say, like, you know, one chapter or one article. And you should always remember that even if the license says that, you know, you can send a chapter on interlibrary loan, or you can send an article on interlibrary loan, if you get repeated requests, you know, from one library, and, you know, on Monday they ask for, you know, the first chapter of that electronic book, and on Tuesday they ask for the second chapter, and on Wednesday they ask for the third chapter, you should, at some point, you should stop sending them, because obviously they're simply trying to get the entire book, right? So you need to be careful about that. That's the one thing to be careful of. So you need to pay some attention to the requests that come in and where they're coming from, so that you're not accidentally, you know, copying the entire, or just sending the entire version of the book to another library against the terms of your license.
Okay, thank you. That was interesting. The following question is the meaning and legal role of the reprographic reproduction understanding in resource sharing. Actually, that terminology is new for me. I just get from our copyright law. So what about you? What do you think about this issue? So
reprographic reproduction,
yeah,
is, yeah, that's the older term, or the older phrase for photocopying or making a copy. So a reprographic reproduction is simply making a copy. And using the phrase reprographic makes it quite broad, you know, so it could be a copy of a journal article, it can be a copy of a map, it can be a copy of a book chapter. So basically any copy of a textual work.
So normally it's like older version of the Word copy, or
all it is.
multiply.
Yes, exactly. So that's all it is. So you just, if you see the word reprographic production, just think copy. And
Okay.
so yeah, so the word it's not anything different. If you see the word reprographic reproduction, it just means copy. So you just follow whatever copying guidelines or copying license terms you have.
And nothing special or I mean specific function of this understanding. Okay. No. Thank you. Oh, public domain, meaning and again role for e-resources. So the understanding of the public domain.
So the public domain, there's two interpretations or two meanings to public domain. In copyright, the public domain means all of those materials where copyright has expired or where there is no copyright. So, you know, if it's an older work where copyright has expired, it's in the public domain. Or if it's a sort of work where it doesn't even have copyright, say like a simple chart or a simple table of data, again, that's in the public domain. So, but lots of people use the word public domain simply to mean, you know, works that are available to the public, which is a much different thing because most works available to the public are protected by copyright still, but works where the copyright has expired, so the copyright definition of public domain, you know, there's not going to be any restrictions on sending those via interlibrary loan or copying them. If you have materials in your library that are not protected by copyright, you can certainly copy the entire thing, copy that entire book, and send it to another library. Or copy the entire journal issue and send it to another library, or copy that entire brochure and send it to another library. So that's really the nice thing about public domain materials, particularly because sometimes they'll tend to be older and more fragile. So it may also be better to send a digital copy of it to another library rather than risk sending the original, which might either be in fragile condition or it might be something your library doesn't want to risk losing. So you also may want to simply send the digital copy of it.
Quick question. The Creative Commons, is it related or under this public domain, or it's separate?
So Creative Commons, so it's based on copyright because only the copyright holder of a work can apply a Creative Commons license to it. So there has to be copyright in the first place in order for someone to apply a Creative Commons license. And then the 6 Creative Commons licenses all have some element of copyright control still remaining in them. Even the most broad one, the CC BY or the CC attribution license, you still have to give attribution. You know, you still have to say who the author was, but it does allow you to then do anything you want with that work, copy it and distribute it as much as you want. And you're right, there is actually a public domain Creative Commons license. So the copyright holder can put this CC or Creative Commons public domain license on something, which really means they've released it into the public domain. They've given up their copyright. Okay.
So the essence of public domain is get rid of the copyright. It is fully open and no restriction on that.
Yes, so public domain, meaning in copyright terms, public domain means there is no copyright in the work. Okay. So it doesn't mean that the work is publicly available. What it means is that there is no copyright.
Okay, thank you. Great. And the next question is about treaties. For example, Marrakesh and I forgot one of them. Just be part of these treaties or this community, or how can we just join or be active in these activities or, I mean, initiatives?
So So the Marrakesh Treaty, which is the international treaty on making textual works available to people with perceptual disabilities, such as people who are blind. So any of those international treaties, they all require that the state, the national state, okay, so Azerbaijan, they would have to, the government would have to take the Marrakesh Treaty, they would have to accede to the treaty, as they say, or consent to that treaty, and then they would take the Marrakesh Treaty and they would bring it into domestic law, in this case, the Copyright Act of the country. So in Canada, for example, Canada agreed to the Marrakesh Treaty, and we incorporated the main elements of the, we incorporated the Marrakesh Treaty into our Copyright Act. So we amended the sections of our Copyright Act that dealt with making copies for people with perceptual disabilities to ensure that they matched the Marrakesh Treaty. So you can't, so a library can't just can't start following the Marrakesh Treaty unless their country that the library is in has agreed to the treaty and is following it.
You just adopt the concept of the treaty to your local copyright law, or
yes, yeah, that's what happens. So,
policies.
yes, so you agree to the treaty, like you agree to the Marrakesh Treaty, and then your country amends the Copyright Act so that it follows the protocols or the guidelines or the requirements of the Marrakesh Treaty.
Now I just remember the Budapest Treaty. It is also related with open access and resource sharing, I guess.
Yeah, so the Budapest definition of open access, yes, that's not a treaty in the same way that the Marrakesh Treaty is. So the Marrakesh Treaty was developed through WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, which has representatives from various national governments that are sent to the WIPO meetings, and they negotiated a new treaty, and it became an international treaty. Whereas the Budapest agreement around open access, that's simply that's just an agreement. So yes, people can sign on to it. Like mostly I would think would be publishers and scholarly organizations. They would agree to the Budapest definition of open access. So when they published open access materials, they make them available. Their definitions of open access would match the Budapest definition of open access. But yeah, the two things are much different. So Marrakesh, that's a formal international treaty that can be adopted into the domestic laws of a country, whereas the Budapest Open Access Agreement is just that. It's an agreement. It's like, hey, this is the definition of open access, and publishers and others are free to utilize that definition when they are talking about open access. Or a funding agency, when they say, oh, it has to be made, the research has to be made open access 12 months after you've completed your research. They can say, open access is this definition from the Budapest Agreement. This is what we mean by open access. So Marrakesh Treaty, it has the force of law. Something like the Budapest Open Access Agreement, it's just an agreement that organizations can sign on to and agree to follow, but it doesn't have any legal backing behind it. It doesn't have the authority of law.
Thank you. Just come to my mind one question that, you mentioned WIPO working. I think it's still working on that, or just they produce that treaty. What about IFLA? You are one of the close members of IFLA, and especially document delivery Resource Sharing Committee. So what can you say about the IFLA, that how they work with similar treaty or with similar agreement rather than WIPO, or just cooperate with WIPO? What about activities of IFLA regarding that copyright and licensing?
So certainly, so I'm a member of the Resource Sharing and Document Delivery Standing Committee of IFLA, and IFLA does, it will be involved with, say, with WIPO through these treaty negotiations. So, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not exactly certain how they are involved, whether they are actually able to send their own delegates or whether they simply depend on ensuring that, members of IFLA are going to WIPO as members of the national groups there. But I'm pretty sure though, when it comes to, like, for example, right now WIPO is working on it for a couple of years, I believe. It'll take a lot longer, but they are now looking at, should there be international norms around copyright exceptions for libraries, and in those sorts of discussions and work by WIPO, they would certainly involve members of IFLA in that, because of course it's about library exceptions. IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations, they would draw upon the expertise of IFLA in helping to work on what are the kinds of exceptions that should be available to libraries in an international copyright treaty. But yeah, for example, with Marrakesh, I truly do not know how IFLA was involved, whether they were involved directly or whether they were just involved through the work of their members being parts of national groups that went. But I'm pretty sure IFLA does get some sort of, they're able to participate in those discussions when it involves libraries.
Thank you. I think in our future activities or just research, we will know better actually through the corporation. My last question, purely about our, local procedures. Maybe other universities also, has this experience. So while we're acquiring databases, especially libraries, journals, and etc., so we have three kind of documents, let's say, in terms of the sharing or interlibrary loan document delivery. And the first one is our local legislation about copyright.
Yep.
The second one is a contract with resource supplier or aggregator, publisher. And the copyright law of the country of origin for the resource. How can we maneuver or just be clear among this documentation, among this law, or what I would say, just to be clear on copyright and licensing when we deal with the resource we acquire from outside of Azerbaijan?
So, so remembering, of course, that I'm not a lawyer and none of this is legal advice, but so the license, when you have an electronic resource, so when a library subscribes to an electronic resource, such as an ebook library, ebook package, or electronic journals, the first place to look is the license that comes with the resource, because that's going to govern how the library can use it. So that's the first thing to look at. And that license is going to govern how the students at the university can use it, how the faculty there can use it, how staff there can use that resource. And it's going to govern how the interlibrary loans department can use it. So it's going to tell the interlibrary loans department, so the license will tell the interlibrary loans department how they may use it for interlibrary loan, for example. Then, so as I mentioned previously, so that license supersedes in almost all countries. That license will supersede the copyright law of the country. So you have to follow whatever the license says. But then once you send, we're going to stick with interlibrary loan. Once you send that, say it's an e-journal. So once you send that e-journal article to another library, okay, so you send it from Baku to another library in Azerbaijan. The person at the other university who gets that article, they're going to be bound by Azerbaijan's copyright law and how they reuse it now, because, you know, they're not bound by the license because they don't have it at their university. That's why they asked you to send it to them in the first place. Okay, and the license can't bind, it can only bind the people at the institution who the license is for. So, you know, this other university, that patron there is going to use it according to their copyright law. Or alternatively, if your license at ADA says that you can send that interlibrary loan internationally, so say you send it to Simon Fraser University, then our patron at Simon Fraser University is going to use that article in Canada according to Canada's copyright law, because again, they can't be bound by the license ADA had, because they don't belong to ADA, they belong to Simon Fraser University. They live in Canada, so they're going to apply Canada's copyright law to it. So the three things that really matter are the license that governs the electronic resource. So that's going to govern the institution where the electronic resource is at. So ADA, it's going to govern how ADA uses it. And then you only really need to worry about copyright for the end user. So the patron who gets a copy of that journal article, they're going to use it according to the copyright law of their jurisdiction. And sticking with, again, document delivery interlibrary loan, it's not up to ADA to worry about the copyright law in Canada. Okay, so for example, Simon Fraser University shouldn't request something from ADA if having a copy of that would be illegal in Canada.
Just quick, I mean, it's not a question, I just want to be clear. The primary document, as I understand, for ADA, for example, where not a resource owner, but just acquire this resource for the certain period, 1 year subscription. And in the license, it said that, okay, you can share this document through the interlibrary loan. So the primary document is a license. Through this document, I can send to my colleague from the University of Economics, let's say, in Baku.
Yep.
So they will use this resource according to the local copyright law. Yes. Am I correct?
You're correct, yes.
And when I will send to the Simon Fraser library, and this library will use according Canadian local copyright law.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, in case of nothing about interlibrary loan and document delivery issues in the license, what steps we need to do? We just refuse the request, or is it any alternative we can share?
So I want to be clear. Do you mean that the license simply is silent? Like the license does not say anything about interlibrary loan?
Yeah,
it doesn't even cover it.
Nothing about it.
Then you'd want to look at the license to see if it does mention something similar. Like, does it even talk about sharing it with people at another institution? Like sometimes a license will have something called scholarly sharing, where it says you may send, you know, a copy of a chapter, or, you know, you may send an article from the licensed resource to, someone at another institution for their scholarly and research purposes. So you could look for language like that, which to my
a little bit different.
my opinion, but it's kind of the same as interlibrary loan, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I see that different language, but in case of the nothing, of course,
if it's nothing at all,
is it?
then
I mean,
it's disallowed.
refuse it or not?
So I would still send out an interlibrary loan, and I would just follow your normal practices.
So can we refer our local, I mean,
Yep.
copyright for the sharing?
Mm-hmm.
If nothing in the license.
If there's nothing in the license, if it doesn't explicitly say that you can't, but again, you have to look carefully at it, because the license may say only authorized users can use the material, can use the licensed material. And if it says that, and if there's no other clauses that broaden that out at all, then you would probably not be able to send out an interlibrary loan, because that person at the University of Economics, they're not one of the authorized users of the electronic resource.
Yeah. Okay, I see. That's clear now. No more questions from my side. Ələkbər, maybe you have some questions. Just newly joined us.
Good day, gentlemen. So I'm sorry for being late. Actually, I have a meeting at my university and a little bit problem with schedules and professors. So yes, I have several questions. So maybe I have missed something. Maybe I've already answered on this. However, I'm always interested in, let's say, foreign practice, Western practice, how we can force authors to obtain copyright for their intellectual property. Kind of tricky question.
Oh, do you have any suggestions, Elchin?
No, I just want to understand that copyright for their articles from the publisher, or you mean here with us? I mean, when they make for the repository. I don't understand that case.
Yes, I should be a little bit clear. I guess in both from the both sides. For example, if author would like to add his or her work to online repository, we always tell that yes, you should have contract with us. However, we also have some problems with this. So how we can do it more softly, more, let's say, technically good. So authors manage to obtain these contracts by themselves, ask by themselves, how to make it more popular. Let's say my question is how make copyright more popular for ordinary authors who are not familiar with legislation and with copyright issues.
Let me, paraphrase your question to the softer way. So, flat way of literacy of the copyright for the authors who want or actually don't want to provide their articles or whatever resources to our institutional repository. Am I correct, Ələkbər?
Great. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for correction.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I do have some responsibilities for our repository at Simon Fraser, and there's two parts to the question, two parts to this issue. So one of them is it is often difficult to get a faculty member to want to deposit their material into the repository because they publish their article and they're done and finished. So at Simon Fraser University, we have I guess you can call it a policy. It's more of an encouragement, but it's an official university policy that encourages faculty members to deposit their research in the repository. So that can help because, the university has an official document. So the university is promoting depositing the work in the repository. So that helps. And on the other side, many times a faculty member is not necessarily quite certain what version they can deposit in the repository. Most publishing agreements now, even when the author transfers their copyright to the publisher, the contract still allows them to deposit some version into a repository, but oftentimes you need to help the faculty member know which version to use. Okay, so normally they can't use the published version. They have to use like the manuscript that they sent in or something like that. So the harder part is not so much around copyright. The harder part is really encouraging them to deposit it in the first place. And once they're willing to deposit it, then you simply help them understand their publishing agreement. But as I said, if they're not certain, they can go to like the Sherpa Romeo website and just look up their journal and see what their rights are for posting a copy in a repository.
Also, excuse me, one more question. But what in case of country policies? So I guess you also mentioned about some changes in local legislation and usage of these policies. So I'm always interested how, for example, country can change these policies of not force again, how to manage people to get more familiar with copyright issues, because as I understood, now we are in a digital era, in electronic resources era. We're moving from print resources to electronic resources, and it's hard to secure these resources from the side of copyright. And of course, on the local legislation, on the governmental level, we have to, let's say, make copyright more popular. So how we can make it, maybe in universities, maybe via publishing houses?
So the best way of promoting copyright education, basically, like providing a better understanding of copyright, ensuring that people know their local copyright, particularly at a university, is through outreach. Like, at Simon Fraser, we will have workshops for faculty, encouraging them to come and learn about copyright. We have the website that explains the university's copyright policies and copyright in general to people, and it's really an institution-wide approach. So you need to be like at a university. I mean, I don't know how ADA is structured, but for example, at ADA, you would want to be, trying to implement some sort of widespread copyright education. I don't mean like mandating people to take it, but you could have a module in your learning management system, which is just free for anybody to take. Maybe, new faculty members are introduced to, they're given like a quick 30-minute overview of copyright and how it affects their work at the university. And particularly if the university has a publishing house, like if the university is publishing material or something like that, you could work with that publisher to ensure that authors are more knowledgeable about copyright and what their rights are, and even work with the publisher, the university's publisher, to ensure that hopefully they're encouraging some reuse of their content, or maybe even that they make it available via open access. But yeah, it's an institution-wide approach, and certainly at Simon Fraser University, we're very fortunate that the university itself wishes to promote copyright, so we're able to have those workshops and promotion of copyright, and we'll talk to graduate students about copyright.
And I guess this will be last question about the workshop. Actually, I'm really interested in such kind of events, and sometimes I also provide not copyright workshop, but it's about cataloging and metadata usage. It's kind of little trainings for staff and for interns. And of course, I would like to learn how to provide such kind of workshops, for example, in future for Azerbaijan. For example, where I can find kind of not templates, but just look up to these workshops and understand the roots of training systems and kind of like this.
And the syllabus, maybe you want to know.
Yes.
The program or the syllabi. As I say, you want this kind of document or some mechanism, follow up of that.
Oh yeah, so like the template, like sort of how would the workshop be organized?
Especially the topics. I mean the order of the topics.
Yes.
The rest of this is a technical, I mean, issues.
Yeah.
Just the right order, follow up all questions step by step, and logically, I mean, make some chain of knowledge about the copyright.
Yeah. So for example, the University of Alberta, I know they have copyright workshops that are openly available. Like they have made videos of them. They have these very nice videos that you could take a look at, and that would sort of lay out for you the progression or what you would want to cover. And you know, I can try to find a couple of things for you as well, and then I can email Elçin and he can send them on to you as well.
Great. I think this will be more than good. I mean, roadmap for the Ələkbər to prepare some adaptive. I mean, for our local librarians, maybe for future in the regional. And I believe it will help Ələkbər. Any more questions, Ələkbər?
No, thank you very much. It was really informative for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Donald, thank you to you.
You're very welcome.
Actually, you spent time with us, share your knowledge and experience. This is very valuable. Hope to see you in a further IFLA, or maybe in Canada, or maybe in Baku.
Yes, that's right. If you ever come to British Columbia, yes, look me up. But yeah, maybe I'll see you at the next IFLA meeting in a couple of years.
Hopefully. Okay, good luck your activities and have a good day. Thank you one more time, and we will talk.
Definitely.
Definitely, and see you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks all.